Hi guys, Togo here with a new video, and this video will be a 10.0.5 tier list video about solo shuffle. And I made a prediction video before 10.0.5, and right now I have a pretty good grasp on the meta, what's strong, what is not, what at least what is scary and what is not scary, because it could be strong, but sometimes it is a bit less scary than a scary class that is actually very hard to counter, for example. But I'm going to discuss about that. There's a few things that are going to change from my prediction. At least I saw the prediction, like you can see it right now. So I put like arms warrior, elemental shaman and such like on S tier, so you can pause the video if you want to see my prediction real quick. Right, and now I'm going to again rank those how it's called, those classes, those specs in order. So I'm going to start with DK, DH, etc. But there will be timestamps, so I can actually give you the incentive to watch the whole video. Would be cool, because I'm giving an explanation on everything I'm saying and everything I'm doing on the tier list. But if you wanna, or if you're only interested in the Warlock discussion, or if you're only interested in the DH discussion, you can always jump at that specific location. Anyways, I want to start to preface, I'm not going to rank tanks because I don't have enough data for it. I'm not saying that it's not strong, I'm just saying that I don't play versus tanks at all. There is not a moment where I'm playing versus a tank, not even a protection paladin, to be honest. So I'm going to rate all of those tanks into the tank tier. It's not below D, it's not ahead of S, it is just a tank tier. So if you want to like judge it for yourself, do it. Brewmaster looks pretty strong in 2s, for example, but we are not talking in 2s. But those are pretty much the tanks, if I'm not mistaken. Now let's start with DK. Frost DK. Now it is a spec that is doing insane amount of damage. Whenever it's left alone, it can do obliterates ranging from 100k to 120k whenever they are doing their pillar go, but it is highly dependent on the enemy team to not have disarm. Whenever I'm facing a frost decay, they can do like very well. They can try to fake goes and I will disarm it, like not on purpose. But now I just know I just have to look at the buff list, and whenever I see pillar frost, it's instant disarmed. If he trinkets that and it's a stormbolt, it's going to be an icebound fortitude, and then I will just fear and he will start doing the lichborn buff. So all their CDs are going to be gone, and then they're going to get wrecked, or they just sit stun, or they sit the fear. But in general, with my warrior, whenever I'm facing a frost decay, it's pretty much a GG's. I win the game. Now I know that versus casters you can really wreck them, and versus a few specs which they don't have a disarm, like for example, demon hunters, feral druids, elemental shaman, enhancement shaman and such, you're going to wreck them whenever you are going to double grip into a blind, into a chill streak, into your pillar of frost. You're going to wreck someone. But for me, it is going to be right now a C tier spec. Because I have to rate the spec based on the whole like cast of players, and in general you will see a lot of rogues, a lot of arms warriors, a lot of fury warriors, a lot of windwalkers, and they all have a disarm. And if you play versus a mistweaver, then even worse, because they can even disarm as well. So it becomes very hard for you to exist in that meta. While for example versus casters you may do good, but again you're kiteable as well. It's not like unkiteable, it's also possible to just stop you. So for me it's a C tier spec. I don't know what they can do to actually change it without making it broken, but that's a problem. That's a static spec in general. It's either the stats are very strong and it's going to be OP like S tier, or the stats are not strong enough to actually make them good enough without Pillar of Frost, and that's the huge issue. If I think Frost Decays, an Enhancement Shaman, and Retribution Paladin are due for a rework, and you also see Retribution Paladin actually reworked very soon. So Unholy Decay, since the nerfs are for me really controversial, because it's quite the same as Frost Decay in the sense where versus magical users you're going to do better, but versus physical users you're going to do worse because you're going to get wrecked. In general, if I see a DK as a Fury Warrior, I'm going to wreck them with huge rampages, huge onslaught with my new build. If you want to check that out, please check my guide, and you will see a huge and fun way to play Fury Warrior. But that aside, I think Unholy Decay is for me still a A tier spec. I want to put it in B tier, but I'm thinking about, look, there is a lot of casters at higher MMR, because if you are at 2k rating, you do see a lot more casters at 2k2, 2k4, even more, like Elemental Shamans, SPs and such, and Unholy Decays kind of do good versus them. At least they can survive, not like an Arms Warrior, which is going to get rooted to death. But Unholy Decays can do some good things, so I think I'll put it in A tier. But if you're facing like double physical, like for example Outlaw Rogue or Assassination Rogue, Arms Warrior, you're going to die pretty quickly, and that's pretty much the variance that you will have in CR, changes that you are going to have as an Unholy Decay. Now, I think Havoc Demon Hunter, I judged it A tier on my prediction, but it is a S tier spec. It is still very strong. The damage is very, very nice. I think a good Demon Hunter, I have to judge also good Demon Hunters as well. It's not like brain dead as you might think, because there is like some subtleties, like for example glimpsing out of like stuns, metamorphosis is out of Spear of Bastion or out of a kidney, for example. Like Shadow Melt, if you're like a Night Elf, try to bait a kidney shot on you. Like you have a lot of ways to actually play your Demon Hunter better than the average Joe. And that's a skill thing that you can actually master as a Demon Hunter. So they have a lot of survivability with Blur, Darkness, Glimpse, very, very strong, very annoying because you become a bit hesitant to actually Stormbolt the Demon Hunter, because if he glimpses it out, then look, you don't have a stun, and Demon Hunters only die in stuns. So that's pretty much my idea behind the S tier spec. I think it's very good versus physical, it's very good versus casters, actually very, very good versus casters. It has a dispel, or a purge, although it's on the CD. It has a reverse magic, so versus hunters you can do something, although you do sit in traps. I think for me it's a S tier spec. Balanced Druid, I think Balanced Druid is a sleeper spec in the sense where now it does some insane damage. I already got Starfired 90k on my Fury Warrior. That guy is like demolishing me. I don't even know how it comes that they do 90k Starfires, but I mean that's fun, it's good. Like a spender or a builder actually doing a lot of damage is something that is good for the game. So I think Balanced Druid is for me A tier. There will be a lot of A tiers. A tier means it is meta. It means that it is really good and you can climb with it. I think Balanced Druid is one of those specs you can climb just by sheer CC. A good root beam into a good celestial alignment with your ally actually bursting at the right time is enough to actually win the game. Now, there will be moments where you will just be running away and try to reset for a second celestial alignment. But whenever you have this second celestial alignment, every time you're going to kill someone, because nobody's going to sustain that after like again a 2-minute CD. So I think it's a very, very strong spec right now. I don't think it's S tier though, but it is definitely better than previously. Feral Druid, I think now Feral Druids are still very strong in social form, don't get me wrong, but the AoE spec is a bit less. People should just adapt right now as a Feral Druid, because you have the Bite build, which is one of the stronger builds that you can play to actually kill healers. You're going to destroy healers because they are not going to notice their health to be down when biting. Now, it's not the easiest build to play because you are very squishy and you are a bit less reliant on dot damage, so you have to do more proactive things. But in general, I think Feral Druids are still A tier. They still kill pets too easily. And in general, you need to understand the A tier has a way to actually counter a spec pretty heavily. Like, for example, Feral Druid, they're going to kill BM Hunters. They're going to kill a lot of pets just by existing. And that's actually something that a Feral Druid can do that some classes cannot do. And for example, whenever I'm playing a pet class, like for example even my Destruction Warlock, whenever I like to play with my pet out because I don't like to sacrifice my pet, they're going to kill my pet if I'm not aware. I need to actually do a focus macro and send my pet on the healer, And even then, if they notice it, they're just going to sit on their heel and actually destroy the pet really quickly. So for me, it's going to be an A tier spec. Resto Druid, I think it has been toned down. It's still strong because you can actually just be passive and do not really interact. I think for me, I don't know, S tier or A tier. I think I'm going to put it in A tier because I'm thinking about another healer in S tier that actually counters pretty hard the Resto Druid. Um, I think it's too passive to right now have some things to say in the game. Sometimes you're going to win because just straight healing is enough, but in some games where just straight healing is not enough, you would like to be a disc priest, for example, and that's a spoiler alert. But disc priest is, for example, very strong, and rest of the druids is a bit less because they don't have the firepower that a disc priest has. But now let's talk about Devastation Evoker. I think that the main issue I see with Devastation Evoker is it is a gimmick spec. So pretty much, if you're not killing into your one shots, you're going to be sitting there doing nothing, actually giving their actually huge opportunities to kill you. Of course, you have Disintegrate actually doing a lot of damage, but it is castable and stoppable. It's also super easy to stop, just a kick and you're good. Um, I don't know, man. I will put it in B tier because I feel like it's very niche. It does a lot of damage, a lot of AoE damage, a lot of pressure because of their existing. Like it's a bit the same like a Frost Decay. Like they have tools that you cannot really ignore. If you're ignoring them, you're going to get wrecked. Like directly by a deep breath into an eternal, like a surge into a fire breath, and then a disintegrate if you're not surviving, or a sleepwalk at the right time on the healer. You have a lot of ways to actually be annoying. But I think it's not enough to actually be A tier right now. I think there's a lot of specs that are just better right in every section of the game. They have one shots, but also a lot of consistent damage. So I think Devastation Evoker does deserve a B tier spot. It's not the same like a Frost Decay, it's not easy stoppable. You do see it coming, so you have to press CDs. But if you're not pressing CDs at the right time, you're going to get obliterated even faster than a Frost Decay that is actually not disarmed while doing a Pillar of Frost. So for me, it's going to be a B tier spec. Preservation Evoker is, for me, going to be still strong. I think Communion not being stoppable anymore is huge for them. It is just in general going to be very hard to actually counter them at the first minute, second minute of the game. But then whenever the ramp up and the dampening is going on, you will have an easier time to kill him. Like just the Preservation Evoker, if he doesn't have CDs anymore, you just switch onto him and he's going to get obliterated. Because again, they will have to be close range. They cannot just not interact like, for example, Resto Druid. So you will have a lot of opportunities to actually switch onto him, but you have to actually see it coming. And often than not, sometimes I just kill them by proxy. But what you could do is just, again, if you have a Dispel or a Purge in your team, please purge their HOTS. It's actually very big. It does more than you would think. And in general, you're going to win more games by doing it. If you're like a purge spec, like for example, Elemental Shaman or Shadow Priest or Disc Priest or Holy Priest, whatever, you can actually do very well versus a Preservation Evoker. Now, BM Hunter, I think I'm going to put it in S tier. Now you're going to say, why BM Hunter S tier? Like, they're not doing much. Really, they are fantastic CC machines. They can just also just scatter shot you whenever you're doing your go, and then you're just like sitting there for 3 seconds. And then Steel Trap Demon Hunter, so he's going to sit there for 8 seconds. And you have a lot of damage. The pets are doing a lot of damage. You are very good at actually kiting. Very good at actually doing damage on the run. And you don't need to be always in the open to do more damage. Their pets are also very durable. I think it's only very hard versus a Feral Druid, for example. And that's why I'm putting Feral Druid in A tier, because it has a way to actually counter one of the S tiers. I think BM Hunter is actually a hidden gem. I think people are like sleeping on it. You just need to see on the ladder and see the amount of people that are actually playing BM and the amount of people that are actually very high rated. It's just insane. I think people are just sleeping on it, and soon you will realize that it is one of the best specs in the game. Now, does it deserve a actual nerf, or does it deserve a change? I don't know. It's very hard to actually change BM Hunter. It's the same like a Frost Decay. It's purely statistic. If the stats are not correct, they're going to get rolled, and whenever they have actually correct stats, they're going to roll over people, and that's what happened. Like, instead of being C tier with the Frost Decay, their damage is actually very nice and very smooth, especially with the 4 set, that it deserves the actual S tier spot. Now, Survival Hunter for me is going to be A tier. The 4 set really helps because it does a lot of damage, but in general, I need to judge good and bad players together, and even the bad players become actually quite good on survival. I think the main problem of survival is actually surviving. Yeah, they are really survivals. But anyways, so they have a spec called survival, and surviving is their problem. But that's pretty much the only problem they have. The damage is very insane. The CC is actually very insane. They have a purge, although it's on the CD, although sometimes you purge the wrong thing. You have ways to counter multiple specs. Steel Trap is such a fantastic spell. And in general, your damage is quite noticeable on the enemy team. You're going to win games just because you zug their enemies. Of course, you need to understand you are going to die very quickly. So if you're going to zug like a Fury Warrior, I think the enemy team is going to zug you back. But that's pretty much the explanation behind survival. If I have to judge like from 1k rating to 2k4, yeah, it deserves to be B tier, but I have to also take the broader player base that is actually playing survival very well. I think survival does deserve a tier spot. Now, on Marksmanship Hunter, I know that some people can make it work, but for me it's D tier. It doesn't matter. I think they rely on the fact that the second DPS on the team is actually doing something. They cannot solo carry anymore, or at least double tap gone is going to hurt them more than you would think. I played a bit of Marksmanship Hunter. I felt like it was missing something. Yes, it can do more damage. Yes, the talent specs are actually better without double tap, because double tap took a huge portion of the actual path that you had to take. But I think they should have put it as a PvP talent for now until they have a solution. But right now they kind of killed the spec, and it's also visible on the actual player base. Like, I'm going to type Mate, and you see the least played spec now is Marksmanship Hunter in 3s. That's actually insane. Everyone migrated to Beastmaster, and you see by Beastmaster actually having 4k games played. It's just not playable. I think it deserves the actual D spot. Now, Arcane Mage. Arcane Mage is in my top 3 or top 4 casters in general. I want to put it in S tier, but I'm not going to do that because I need to think about the other specs I'm going to put in S tier. I think I'm going to put it in top of A tier. Really close of S tier, really close. I think it is doing fantastic. There is a way for them to actually win games alone, like pretty much. Of course, there are games where you're going to get drained down, and it is your job to actually survive, and that's pretty much your job. And if you can survive, you will win the game, even though you didn't do too much damage. But if you are left open and you're doing an arcane surge into double arcane blast, into of course an arcane missile and an arcane barrage whenever they are low HP, Touch of Magi is going to destroy them. Like, there's a lot of ways that our Arcane Mage is going to do insane damage, and I think it deserves the A tier spot. I would even say maybe the S tier spot, but I have to put other specs in S tier, where I'm thinking like, maybe I should put Arcane Mage for now in A tier. So Fire Mage is for me going to be surprisingly B tier. Now surviving is still the problem, but there's a way with Alter Time and Hypothermia. I think it's the PvP, like not PvP talent, but the talent on the bottom right, where you're going to spam Pyroblast. That, if it pops together, you are instant winning. It doesn't matter who is DPSing versus you, you're going to spam pyroblasts and you're pretty much going to do insane damage. And excuse me, I said alter time, I meant time warp. So you will have like time warp with the middle bottom talent from the mage class, and then you have hypothermia. I think it's like again bottom right spec talent, and that together you will do like a machine gun pyroblast. Now I don't see a lot of fire mages though, and yes, it is a bit cheesy, but I think B tier is really the cheesy a good spec. So you have like good specs that actually have a cheesy way to win games, and sometimes it is just enough to actually win games. So I think really Fire Mages has more potential because people are like looking out at the actual damage that you can produce. Now, it's better than Arcane or Frost Mage? I don't think so. That's why it's B tier. It is very close to C tier, so you should notice that as well. It's very close to C tier. It should be noted that it depends on the player's skill to actually make it work. It is not an instant win spec at all, especially since you need to survive a lot, and it is actually very hard as a fire mage to actually survive. So that's why it deserves the B tier spot. Now, Frost Mage, I think it's a sleeper spec. I think it's very strong. I think it counters many specs. It does insane damage without casting. And if you have the chance to do actually glacial spike, you might just kill someone. So that's pretty much Frost Mages. They have insane control, they have insane mobility, insane double ice block. If you're using it correctly, you win games pretty much automatically because people cannot react on that. They cannot do MDs all the time, and some priests don't play with MD as well because they play with other talents, for example. So I think Frost Mages are going to be A tier with Arcane. It could be ahead of Arcane, it could be behind Arcane, but I think Frost Mage is at this very moment a hidden gem, at least in the A tier spot. People are sleeping on it. I know that it is highly trainable. I know that you can die pretty quickly if you're kicked on the Frost Cool. Yes, you have Polymorph then, but sometimes you don't have enough time to do the Polymorph because they will do micro CC on you. I think just in general, Frost Mage is not the easiest spec to play, but I think you can make it work, and it's for me a 8-tier meta spec right now. You see that there is a lot of casters right now on the A and the S tier spot because casters are actually very strong, or at least ranged ones, like for example BM Hunter. They are very, very strong. People are like sleeping on it. I know that melee lobbies are very annoying, but at higher MMR, at least from 2k and more, so I'm going to say like mid to high MMR, you see a lot of casters because casters just work. And there is also a stat going on where casters have more win rate than melees. The thing is, casters have CC. Casters have more CC than, let's say, an Arms Warrior or a Fury Warrior. So you have more agency to actually win a game. Sometimes just one polymorph at the right time is enough. Sometimes one fear as a Warlock is enough to actually win the game. And that you should notice as a caster main as well. Mistweaver Monk, I think Fist Weaving is very strong, but it's still random. Smart healing is just not a thing. I want to put it in B tier, but I'm going to put it... For now, I'm going to put it in B tier, in C tier. I think it's very counterable, and it is very random how the smart heal works. I think they should just rework it or do it like Holy Paladins, for example. Maybe reduce the healing and make it AoE, so it pops a healing on everyone. But that's difficult. They need to have throughput as well. But having a shorter cocoon helps a ton and just makes sometimes games a bit longer than it should. But it is still highly killable whenever they cocoon someone. People just notice, look, I'm going on the Mistweaver, I'm going to train him down until he's dead. And it's also highly kickable if you're playing a caster and you have a focus macro on the Mistweaver. Generally, you can just kick easily the Soothing Mist and they are going to get destroyed. So I think in general, C tier might be B tier. I'm going to see at the end of the video whenever I'm going to structure the whole tier list. Windwalker, I think it's a very good 8-tier spec. I think it's very strong. It carries games, has CC, has the potential to actually be mobile and run away. Again, if you're playing a Windwalker and you're not running away, you're playing the wrong spec. I think it's not a brawler like I'm going to sit on your face at all times kind of spec. You need to think like, look, I have my CDs, I pop my CDs, nothing worked, I need to go back and just relax. If you're going to sit in the face of a warrior and you think you're going to survive their cities, well, you're going to be wrong. But that's also the reason why Windwalkers are so strong in the ladder. You see in the top 10, top 20, you will see multiple Windwalkers, which is actually insane because, again, Windwalker is not the most popular spec, but they have huge ladder representation. And they can still win. They can. Their damage is still disgusting. Of course, they did get tuned, but I think whenever you play the Windwalker, you will understand that the damage is still very high, and you still have ways to do damage, which some classes and specs don't have. Now, Holy Paladin, they got wrecked on the changes, man. They got wrecked. I think Bubble, Bob, Sack, all of these are still very strong versus melees. Now the problem is if you're playing versus casters, this is not going to be a good time for you. You're going to get wrecked multiple times. If you're playing like melee wings again, it's not the same anymore. You need to spend holy power, and sometimes you don't have the holy power, and sometimes you have the holy power, but you want to spend it somewhere else. So for me, it's going to be a B tier spec. I think it could be also a C tier spec. The nerfs were warranted, but also unwarranted. The reason why Holy Paladins are very strong right now is because it's countering a specific spec that is S tier, maybe even higher than S tier. And some healers don't have the same tools to actually stop them. But for me, B tier right now, I might restructure at the end of the video and see where I'm going to put the healers. I think the healers are the most difficult ones to actually rate because it always depends on perspective. I'm playing Warlock, I destroy Holy Paladins, for example. But as a warrior, you will have a bit more or less like leniency to kill a Holy Paladin. And a rogue, for example, they're going to get like some ghosts going to be stopped just because of a bob, for example, or a sack at the right time to actually break blind or whatever. So for me, B tier. Holy Paladin. Now they got changed on their burst. It is still very strong. Now, is it stronger than survival? Maybe. Is it stronger than Windwalker? I would say no. Is it stronger than Feral Druid? I would say no. I'm going to put it in good tier. So good tier is B tier. I think it's a good spec. Especially with the rework going on, I think they will skyrocket into the S tier. But right now, I think Paladin deserves the B tier spot. Just in general, it's a good spec, reliable, has Bob, has Sack, has Bubble, so you can actually stop rogues. But your one shot is gone, so now you cannot rely on it, and sometimes consistent damage is just not enough in Soul Shuffle. But I think it's still a very good spec, and it's going to get changed, so I think it's for the better that it will get to S tier once it is changed. Disc Priest is for me a S tier spec, very strong, huge damage. Sometimes you get like solo kills by a Disc Priest. Their healing is actually very good, but what's very strong in actual Soul Shuffle is the damage reduction. Double PS, barrier, rapture, all of those things are actually very awesome in Soul Shuffle, and that's why for me Disc Priest is really a S tier. I would say that it is one of the best healers, if not the best healer. And I think the difference between a good Disc Priest and a bad Disc Priest is insane. I'm a very bad Disc Priest, for example, but like you just need to look at the ladder and the ladder representation of Disc Priest. They skyrocketed since 10.0.5, and yeah, I think you see only Disc Priest most of the time. Whenever I'm doing a Soul Shuffle, it's either Disc Priest versus Resto Druid, or double Disc Priest, or Disc Priest versus Holy Paladin, or Holy Priest. But there's always a Disc Priest versus me, and that's always the feeling I have in current Soul Shuffle matches. Which is a good thing. It means that it is a fun spec, and people do play Disc Priest like a DPS. So I think they should just make all the healers kind of like Disc Priest, but not like similar like the Disc Priest, but like the same philosophy where you are encouraged to do damage. Right now, a Resto Druid, if they're going melee, I mean, you're just asking to get CC'd to the ground and actually lose games. But a Disc Priest, for example, they can stand from far away, do a Chism into mind games, mind blast, and do a lot of damage with death, for example, with expiation. So you have a lot of ways to actually do damage, but also heal with a Disc Priest. And I think damage reduction is still king, so that's why it's S tier. Holy Priest, I think it's on the same level as Mistweaver. I think it's a joke. They do get affected by dampening the most. Yeah, I don't know, man. If I feel like it's just a Disc Priest, but like a baby Disc Priest. It's not strong. It's ridiculous how some games you're going to get destroyed. Of course, you have games where you're going to win, but is it because of you or the DPS is actually doing a lot of like the groundwork for you? So I don't know. It's very weird. Holy Priest was looking good, but then in Social, I don't know. It feels like they get wrecked multiple times. Shadow Priest, I think it's still A tier. It's one of the best specs to actually kill DPSs because you can just CC the healer and you're going to be Gucci. It's not an easy spec because you're going to get trained down. I think your life will be just getting trained down. But in general, I feel like Shadow Priest is a hidden gem. People don't know, but they are still one of the most played spec out there and one of the most representative specs on the ladder. I mean, what can a healer do whenever they get stunned, silence, feared, and then while you are feared, getting killed in the process? So I think Shadow Priest is going to be a very good spec right now. Assassination Rogue, easy S tier. If I could put like the Rogue tier, I would put it in a Rogue tier. Like above S tier, it's actually insane. It does a lot of damage, a lot of like healing reduction. In general, it is one of the best specs right now. It deserves a nerf as a caster. It is miserable because you do get a haste reduction with their poison, numbing poison, which is really sad to play against. I feel like they should just remove it by now. They need to encourage casters to actually cast, but with numbing poison being there, with curse of tongues being there and such, you are actually not encouraged to cast. And I think as a caster, you should do more casting damage. But right now, instant damage is pretty much king, and that's why the next caster in S tier you will see it will be one of the Shaman specs. But that's a spoiler. Now Outlaw Rogue, I think it's going to be a good spec, so it is strong. But there is a reason why it's not played too much, because they don't really have real burst, or at least whenever they do burst, they have to spend so many GCDs to actually get to that point that sometimes games are just not going to last that long. But there are many rogues, or at least many outlaw rogues, they do gain CR pretty quickly and pretty reliably. But the question is, would you not win more CR by just going Assassination Rogue? That's the question. And I know comparing two specs of one class is a bit unfair, but you have to do it. Like, if you compare Assassination Rogue with Outlaw Rogue feels like a good spec, but it's not a god tier spec, like for example Assassination Rogue. Assassination Rogue is due for a nerf, Outlaw Rogue not, for example. So that's pretty much my reasoning behind the B tier. B tier, again, it means good, so I'm going to write good. It is a good tier. And A tier means it is meta, S tier means it's god, C tier means that it is underpowered, and D tier means it is garbage. And that's pretty much the tier, right? Subtlety Rogue, I think it's going to be a good spec. I think it's very, very, how it's called, dependent on the actual classes in the game, and also the specs in your lobbies and the lobby itself, if they are playing correctly or not. If you're not playing correctly as a Subtlety Rogue, it just feels like a D tier spec. But I think you can still win in a smoke bomb, you can still win in a shadowy duel, you can be very annoying with double vanish. The CD reduction with double vanish is actually insane. In general, I think it's a very good spec to begin with. Alright, now we are with the Shamans. And Elemental Shaman is, for me, with no surprise, still S tier. Now, there are people that are going to say, but look, I have melee lobbies and I'm going to get destroyed. I'll go 0-6 versus them. Now, the thing is, Elemental Shaman don't need to cast. So even if the melees are going to go on you, it's actually a good thing. It means that, again, you will be able to push them away more easily. You're going to thunderstorm them away easily. You have Unleash Shield. You have also Earth Shock into a Frost Shock, which is a fruit. You have a lot of ways to actually survive melees, but you have to use your tools pretty correctly. Again, if you're using Astral Shift on a Wimp, yes, you're going to get punished, but you have many ways to actually counter people. You can static field totem if it's a melee. You can just also drag that static field totem away from you, so that those guys are going to get teleported away. You have also Unleash Shield. You have Thunderstorm. Again, you need to use your tools correctly. Lightning Lasso as well. If they're kicking you on Lightning Bolt, no problem, right? Fine on Lightning School, no problem, right? You still have Lava Burst doing a lot of damage. So you need to actually play around that. And Lava Burst actually being the spell that is going to be very scary, and then into a big Earth Shock into maybe a Stormkeeper, well, someone is going to die. And Surge of Power is such a big talent for them. Stormkeepers is actually a trend setter, but also a pace setter. So whenever you're doing an Earth Shock with your Stormkeeper, you might just one-shot someone if you crit it at the right time. And Lava Burst, again, something that you will not cast, and you can cast if they are not on you, but again, you can just play around the instance and do a lot of damage. So that's pretty much why I put them at A tier. I think they're destroying arms and Fury Warriors in general. They're destroying multiple specs. You can look, as a melee player myself, whenever I'm playing with Elemental Shaman, I feel miserable, because whenever I'm like melee with them, and I see Primordial Wave up, and I see Stormkeepers up, I know I'm going to die, because the healer will not notice it, I have no CDs anymore, and at that very moment I just get zapped. And you cannot do anything versus that, because again, they just don't need to cast. And yes, you can stun them or whatever, but sometimes it is just not enough. So for me, Elemental Shaman is S tier. It's very hard to actually nerf or buff them, because if you nerf them, you need to nerf them intelligently. I think I would say Stormkeeper is fine how it is, but it could just nerf Surge of Power, for example. Primordial Wave maybe a longer CD, but it's very hard to actually do that, right? So we'll see what they can do to actually make Elemental Shaman go in line. But there is a reason why Elemental Shaman is actually very strong right now. It is because they have insane damage. Now, Enhancement Shaman, I think, wow, I want to put it in D tier, but does it deserve... I'm going to put it in D tier for good measure, because people just need to notice. I play myself Enhancement Shaman. I think it's a miserable experience most of the time. If you play versus casters, it's fine, but again, you're going to get kited most of the time. Wind Shear is a great spell, but it's not enough to stop two casters, for example. Run Totem 2, you can be very, very bursty, but you can get stopped while you're bursting, and your CDs are quite long. I think Elemental Blast not doing like the damage that he did before kind of gimped them, because again, Enhancement Shaman, like I said, it's a stat check class spec. I mean, so whenever it's very strong, it is because the numbers are very strong. Whenever you're doing a Doom Winds, whenever you're doing an Ascendance, a big Storm Strike, or a Lava Lash, or Elemental Blast, in general, it is going to be strong because your numbers are correct. If the numbers are not correct, there's nothing to save them, because you can't really save yourself in stuns. You can't really hex really quickly because they are on you at all times. You are the target, so it's not easy to actually do that. And you're going to get kicked on a nature school, so basically you cannot heal yourself. And your power is tied to Maelstrom, which is basically you're going to spend it for damage like Lightning Bolt or Elemental Blast, but you will see yourself actually cast Healing Surge most of the time, which just halts any damage you can actually do as an Enhancement Shaman. So I think they do need a rework. It's either too strong or it's not, and right now it is just not. So for me, it's going to be D tier. It could be C tier, but I want to preface that I'm a bit biased. I want to make you guys understand that it is really a terrible spec and needs a lot of love to actually go back to the glory days, which is probably Wallows of Draenor or even Mist of Pandaria kind of things. Um, Restoration Shaman. I think Restoration Shaman is a easy A tier. I think it's very, very strong. It has ways to stop goes very quickly. A good earthen wall or even a double earthen wall can stop one big go. Just DPSs are actually needing of a brain to just stay in, but whenever they can stay in, they're going to be safe. And Healing Tide, very annoying to actually kill in Soul Shuffle because people are not noticing it for some reason. So if you're the only DPS trying to kill the Healing Tides, you're going to get stopped instantly. Lasso is actually very strong. Stormkeeper, very strong. You still have a lot of damage as a Resto Shaman, so I think in general, it's one of those specs that are going to be performing very well. So for me, it's going to be A tier. Affliction Warlock, now, there is a bug, but I'm not going to judge the bug. I think it's the Drain Life is doing too much damage. But I feel like I can't really judge a spec based on a bug. So for me, I'm going to judge it as is. So it means with the dampening that there is, with the meta that there is, which is pretty bursty, with the ways that we need to actually do big single target damage to actually kill someone, I think like Affliction Warlock is just a B tier spec. They, like, people are judging Affliction Warlock as if survivability is everything, but you need to understand if they're top DPS by a little margin because of dots, which is multi-dotting, which is multi-target, you need to actually understand that whenever you're doing divided by 3, that is the single target damage you're actually producing as a Warlock, and that is abysmal. Whenever I'm doing like 40k DPS as an Arms Warrior or a Fury Warrior, and an Affliction Warlock does 50 or 60k DPS multi-target, well, the truth is, single target 40k DPS is still going to be more stronger than just 20k DPS on a single target. So I think Affliction Warlock, they are good. I think it's just meta dependent. Whenever the meta would change to a point where dampening can occur, Affliction Warlock can be strong. But the problem is you need to rely on your teammate to not die until you can ramp up. And sometimes you have rounds where you have like lost in the first 30 seconds of the match, and you didn't even have 3 targeted dotted. So that's very, very hard. Soul Swap is also a bit clunky, but they did fix a few things. So now you can also Soul Swap Soul Rot and such, or you can maybe make it work like this way. But again, they need single target, like a single target focused build could do wonders, but right now you don't have that. So for me, it's going to be a B tier spec, which is good, but I think it is just not on par as the other Warlock specs. Demonology Warlock, I think is going to be a A tier spec. So it is S tier for people that are not noticing Tyrant, not noticing Pit Lord, not noticing how to stop Demonology Warlock. But whenever you actually understand the Demonology Warlock and you know what to do to actually stop him, because again, some people are rushing in whenever the Demonology Warlock actually precasts the Nether Portal, which for me is mind-blowing. You just need to go back and just wait that Nether Portal to be gone. But that's the reason why you lose games versus Demonology Warlock, because you're not thinking about the spells that you're actually using. But in high, like in not in high MMR, but like in 2.3k MMR, people notice it, and then you just walk back, relax, and go back in. You can also just root the Pit Lord, you can also root the Fell God. So you have a lot of ways to actually stop Demonology Warlock to perform, but you need to actually be proactive at that and actually think about ways to actually counter it. So now Destruction Warlock is for me in the top 3, top 4 best specs right now in Solo Shuffle, at least caster wise. I don't know if I'm going to put it in A tier or if I prefer to put it in S tier, because I need to understand. You need to understand that for me, BM Hunter is really, really strong. Look, I'm going to backpedal from my prediction. I'm going to put it in A tier because I feel like BM Hunter is better right now than Destruction Warlock. So we have Elemental Shaman, BM Hunter, and then Destruction Warlock with Arcane Mage probably on the same place. Because Destruction Warlock has ways to actually do insane AoE damage because of Bane of Havoc, which is a PvP talent that works with Mayhem, which is a proc that gives you Havoc. So basically you're going to have multiple ways to do AoE damage without them noticing it, or even multiple ways to do coils, or multiple ways to actually make them scared of you. And whenever you can have a few Chaos Bolts cast, you can do a lot of damage, and people are just going to sleep on it. And Destruction Warlock is a spec that is really relying on, look, if you're not going on me, you're going to lose. If you're going on me, you might lose. And that's something that specs have, like for example Elemental Shaman. But Destruction Warlock is like ×2, because Elemental Shaman, if you leave it alone, it still has Lava Burst, it does a lot of damage, but a Destruction Warlock that can free cast 3 Chaos Bolts in a row is going to destroy someone. Because Chaos Bolt, even though it feels like it's hitting for like a wet noodle, I can crit for 100k, and whenever I can crit 100k, 90k, 80k for example, someone is going to disappear. And my Shadow Burn actually crits for 70k as well. So there is ways like a Destruction Warlock can actually like solo like teams. But you need to play with pets. You need to play with either the Succubus or the Fell Hunter, depending on the situation. I think it's very fun to have the Fell Hunter to actually go on the actual healer. So it stick on the healer, and whenever he casts, just directly silence him. It's not easy because sometimes you just get schooled and pretty much baited on the kicks. But like this priest that is actually doing a mind games, often than not they're not going to fake it. They're going to try to do a mind games on you because they want to do at the right specific moment. If you're stopping that at that moment, you're going to give you more time to actually breathe. Destruction Warlock is actually insane. So for me, it's a top 3, top 4 spec. It depends on where you put Arcane. I feel like Destruction Warlock is better than Arcane in general, but I might be wrong depending. I'm very biased because I do play Destruction Warlock. I think for me, Destruction Warlock is the S tier spec, but I need to think about like, look, if BM Hunter is S tier, I don't think Destruction Warlock is S tier. So that's why I put it a bit lower. Now, Arms Warrior is one of those specs that I did overshoot in the prediction, because you do play versus a lot of melees, but then whenever you face versus an Elemental Shaman or a Shadow Priest, which is also easily killed, but you need to understand the combination of those, or even Balance Druid, for example, or very good Devastation Evoker, it's going to actually make you feel miserable. Or Arcane Mages, Arcane Mages, they're going to blow you up if you're not like looking, or like if you're not noticing it, you're going to get blown up. I think Arms Warriors is actually better than before, but not better than the prediction I've actually made. Like my prediction, it was like S tier. For me now, right now, it is A tier. I think it's one of the best melees though, but it is very matchup dependent. If you're facing double caster, you're dead 100%, because it is not winnable without coordination. And Arms Warrior is one of those specs that do need some coordination with the other DPS. And you can also get rooted, snared, and kited around more than, let's say, a Demon Hunter can. So, and even an Assassination Rogue. I think you have a lot of natural enemies as Arms Warrior that realistically I cannot put it in S tier, but I think it deserves the A tier pretty easily. Fury Warrior, it's better than people are actually supposing. I do play a lot of Fury right now. The build I'm actually playing, and I did make a video about it, is actually feeling like an Arms Warrior, but like an anti-caster Arms Warrior. And yes, Arms Warrior is better versus melees, but in those lobbies where you have Elemental Shamans and the Shadow Priest and like an Arcane Mage or a Frost Mage, you do want to be Fury. Or a Hunter that actually steel traps you, Blood Rage is the best solution. And that just helps you to actually survive many damage that is actually going on to you. So for me, Fury Warrior is... I'm going to put it in A tier. People are sleeping on it. I think Slaughterhouse is like a PvP talent that you do not take every time, because again, if you're playing with an Arms Warrior or an Assassination Rogue or whatever, you never have the opportunity to stack it, because it gets overwritten before you can actually stack. And once it's overwritten, it's very hard to actually get those stacks rolling. While, for example, if you're playing with a caster, like say a Destruction Warlock, and you put your Slaughterhouse, at that very moment, you are one of the most dangerous melees on the actual roster. So I really like Fury. Now I think it's on the verge of B, and I might be biased too. But I'm going to now sort the tier list, and you can then see where I put everyone at the right place. For me, Windwalker is a bit better than Holy DK. I think Holy DK is between Feral and Windwalker. Fury Warrior is probably better than Survival in my opinion. Caster wise, this is pretty much the lists. I would say it's ahead of Balance Druid. Shadow Priest is probably around between Arcane and Frost, and that is pretty much the list. And then you have Rest Druid being very tight. For me, it's tied with Restoration Shaman. You have Retribution Paladin being better than Outlaw, but worse than Saboteur Rogue. Fiction Warlock is probably better than Devastation in my opinion. Healer wise, I think, yeah, it's good like this. And Mistweaver is going to be better than Holy Priest in my opinion. And Frost Decay, it's alone, so I'm going to put it at head of the C tiers. And we have Enhancement Shaman being ahead of Hunter. Now I hesitate, but I think I'm going to put it behind Enhancement Shaman. So this is pretty much the list. Again, please let me know what you think about the tier list. Let me know if you have questions or like reasoning behind my actual decisions on the tier list. I think this tier list is pretty accurate. I might be wrong. But again, I might also be biased because I do play Fury. I feel like Fury is very strong right now with the build that I'm suggesting. Please do not play Bloodbath. It's useless in Soul Shuffle. You're just going to play consistent damage, and it's not enough to actually score kills. You're pretty much asking them to actually carry you, and I prefer you to be a carry. So please play a build that is actually going to carry. I think in general, it's very hard to actually rate healers. Because I think there's also a lot of bias. If you are like an assassination rogue, you might say, damn, I don't like Bob. But if you're playing like a feral druid, you would like to play versus a priest, for example, because they cannot have tools to actually stop you. So I don't know. It depends on always the characters that you're playing and facing and whatever. But this is pretty much my list. Again, let me know in the comment section below. Again, subscribe to the channel if you haven't done that yet. You will see more PvP content, guides, tips and tricks, tier lists, social for matches, gameplay, whatever. You can check it on my channel. Please be sure to stay safe. We will catch each other very soon in a next video. Have a great day. Bye.